Let's take a second to talk about the difference between calorie restriction and calorie dilution. Calorie restriction is quite literally the process of eating less calories, whereas calorie dilution is the process by which we reduce the amount of calories per volume of food that we are consuming. For example, because vegetables have about 100 calories per pound, they are more calorically dilute than beans and legumes, which contain about 600 calories per pound. Obviously, if you consume a lot of calorie dilute foods, you will end up in a caloric deficit. But the preliminary data that we do have, mostly on animals, indicates that calorie dilution may have some beneficial effects compared to simply cutting the food that you're eating in half but not changing your food choices. Mice that are simply given less of the same food see higher ratings of hunger, higher anticipatory behavior when it comes to food, greater reductions in energy expenditure, a lower percentage of fat mass loss, and a higher RER. RER stands for respiratory exchange ratio, and the thing that alters your respiratory exchange ratio is the specific macronutrient you are oxidizing at that moment in time. The oxidation of fat will lower your RER, whereas the oxidation of protein and carbohydrates will raise it. The mice following the calorie dilution diet had a lower RER, indicating that per gram they were oxidizing more fat and less carbohydrates and protein, which may lead to better body composition in the long run. Obviously, these mice lost weight because they did see a reduction in fat mass, therefore they were in a caloric deficit. But they achieved this deficit through calorie dilution, which appeared to favor their body composition, energy expenditure, and their ability to regulate their appetite and food intake. We don't have substantial studies on this exact topic in humans. The ones we do have look at giving people a calorie dilute meal and seeing how this changes their intake the rest of the day. Interestingly, it appears like young children will compensate for a calorie dilute meal by eating higher calorie snacks throughout the rest of the day, whereas older children appear to fail to adequately compensate, and by the end of the day do eat less calories if they begin their day with a calorie dilute meal. Another study giving participants unrestricted access to food, however, 1/3 of the food they had access to was calorie dilute, found that these subjects immediately and completely compensated for these calorie dilute options by increasing their consumption of non-calorie manipulated food items, meaning that if you were at a buffet and you had the choice, you would choose the foods with the highest calorie density, even if there were more calorie dilute options. Therefore, being conscious of these natural tendencies is very important. One experiment gave participants a normal meal or a meal in which they replaced the normal fat that they were using with a non-absorbable synthetic fat. Essentially, the participants were eating the same exact meal, but one group was simply unable to actually absorb the fat from that meal. They found that this resulted in about a 30% reduction in mealtime caloric intake and a 23% reduction in daily caloric intake. I'm not saying to go out and consume non-absorbable fats. However, this does mimic what fiber does, as fiber can add bulk to a meal but reduce the amount of absorbable calories, therefore making that meal slightly more calorically dilute. Other foods that are calorically dilute include fruits, vegetables, and many whole grains. And things that are non-calorically dilute include things like added oils and added fats, as well as things like dressings and added sugars. This is not saying you cannot include these items, but understand they may not be nearly as filling and they are very calorically dense. With that being said, it does appear like there's a specific macronutrient which we would not want to dilute in the diet, and that is protein. On average, humans will consume about the same percentage of protein every single day. And the more dilute our foods are in protein, the more calories we will end up consuming to reach a specific protein threshold. This is referred to as the protein leverage hypothesis. Large-scale surveys indicate that as dietary percentage of energy from protein decreases, total energy intake increases, and so does adiposity. It appears that humans will consume calories until they meet a specific requirement for protein. And the more dilute your food is in protein, the more calories you must consume in order to achieve this goal. Therefore, the most effective strategy for calorie dilution may be to dilute the percentage of carbohydrates and fat you are consuming, while trying to maintain or increase the percentage of protein, and reducing calories while still eating the same volume of food by consuming foods with a higher percentage of water and fiber. With that being said, if you would like an individualized approach to your nutrition and lifestyle to optimize your health, energy, and body composition, send me a DM to sign up for a consultation.